no security for the people. I have no doubt you acted honestly, but that does not make it any better, except as far as you are personally concerned, and you see, this is why I cannot vote for you. We're going to pause for a moment, and we will be back. Just what is Calvinism? Doesn't this teaching reduce man to a deterministic robot and make God the author of sin? What about free will? If Calvinism is true, then why evangelize? How could so many of the great soul winners, men like Spurgeon, Whitefield, Edwards, Newton, and Wilberforce, call the Arminian doctrine of free will heresy? Amazing Grace, the History and Theology of Calvinism, is the first video documentary that answers these and other related questions. Rich in graphics, dramatic vignettes, and biblical analogies, Amazing Grace, the History and Theology of Calvinism also features many of the finest scholars and theologians of our time. Men like Dr. R.C. Sproul, Dr. D. James Kennedy, Dr. Tom Askell, Dr. Ken Talbot, and Pastor Walter Bowie, just to name a few. Order Amazing Grace, the History and Theology of Calvinism on DVD by visiting us on the web at www.nicenecouncil.com or call toll-free 866-735-9582. Come, learn what the great Baptist preacher C.H. Spurgeon meant when he said, to deny Calvinism is to deny the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Bones that started a Reformation.
This is History Unwrapped with your host, Gary DeMar.
John Wycliffe's efforts to translate the Bible into the language of the people led to a reform movement that would take England and the New World by storm. Like Luther, Calvin, and Tyndale, Wycliffe's reform efforts did not go unopposed. 31 years after his death, the Council of Constance ordered his writings to be burned and his bones exhumed and buried in unconsecrated ground. In 1428, the Pope ordered Wycliffe's remains to be dug up again and burned. The sacred scriptures, Wycliffe wrote, are the property of the people, and one which no party should be allowed to take from them. In the end, Wycliffe's ashes became seed for a reformation that transformed the world.
American Vision brings to you History Unwrapped. If you enjoyed this free episode of the show, check out the History Unwrapped Volume 1 DVD. You will find it at AmericanVision.com. That's AmericanVision.com.
Okay, and we are back. Colonel Crockett later reflected on that moment. I tell you, I felt streaked, meaning marked. I saw that if I should have opposition in the upcoming campaign, and this man should go about talking, he would set others to talking, and in that district, I would probably lose. Actually, Colonel Crockett uses a phrase here saying, and in that district, I would have been a gone fawn skinned. Colonel Crockett explains, I could not answer this man, and the fact is, I was so fully convinced that he was right, I did not want to. But I knew I must satisfy him, and so I said to him, well, my friend, you hit the nail upon the head when you said I had not enough sense to understand the Constitution. Believe me, I intended to be guided by it, and I thought I had studied it fully. I have heard many speeches in Congress about the powers of Congress, but what you have said here at your plow has got more hard, sound sense in it than all of the fine speeches I have ever heard. If I had ever taken the view of it that you have, I would have put my hand into the fire before I would have given that vote. And if you will forgive me and vote for me again, if I ever vote for another unconstitutional law, I would wish that I would be shot. Now at this phrase, the man laughingly replied, yes, Colonel, you have sworn to that once before, but I tell you what, I will trust you once again upon one condition. You say that you are convinced that your vote was wrong. Your acknowledgement of this wrong vote will do more good than beating you for it. If, as you go around the district, you will tell people about this vote, and that you are satisfied it was wrong, I will not only vote for you, but I will do what I can to keep down opposition, and perhaps I may exert some little influence in that way. As if to drive the point home, and seeing now in this man that he may have made a friend and an ally, Colonel Crockett said again, "Well, trust me, if I don't keep my word, I do wish I may be shot. And to convince you that I am earnest in what I say, I will come back this way in a week to 10 days, and if you will get up a gathering of people, I will make a speech to them. In fact, get up a barbecue and I'll pay for it." Now the man responded to this request with these words, "No, Colonel, we are not rich people in this section, but we have plenty of provisions to contribute for a barbecue, and some to spare for those who have none. The push of crops will be over in a few days, and we can then afford a day for a barbecue. This is Thursday. I will see to getting it up on Saturday week. Come to my house on Friday, and we will go together. And I promise you a very respectable crowd to see and hear you." Somewhat excited by this, Crockett answered, "Well, I'll be here. But one more thing before I say goodbye. I must know your name." The man said, "My name is Bunce." And Crockett responded, "Not Horatio Bunce?" And the man said, "Why, yes." Crockett responded, "Well, Mr. Bunce, I never saw you before, though you say you have seen me, but I know you very well, and I am glad I have met you, and very proud that I may hope to have you for my friend." Crockett later explains that it was one of the luckiest hits of his life to meet Horatio Bunce. He mingled but little with the public, but was widely known for his remarkable intelligence and incorruptible integrity, and for a heart brimful and running over with kindness and benevolence, which showed themselves not only in words, but also in acts. Crockett explained that this man was the oracle for the whole country around him, and his fame had extended far beyond the circle of his immediate acquaintances. Crockett explained, though I had never met him before, I had heard much of him, and but for this meeting, it is very likely I would have had opposition due to that vote, and I probably would have been defeated. But Crockett continues his narration. He says, "At the appointed time, I was at his house, having told our conversation to every crowd I had met, and to every man I stayed with all night. I found that it gave people an interest and a confidence in me stronger than I had ever seen manifested before. Though I was considerably fatigued on the Friday night when I reached his home, and under ordinary circumstances would have gone straight to bed, I kept this man up until midnight, talking about the principles and affairs of government, and I got more real, true knowledge of them than I had received all of my life before." Crockett says this, "I have known and seen much of him since this first encounter, for I respect him. No, that is not the word. I reverence and love him more than any other living man, and I go to see him 2 or 3 times every year. And I tell you, sir, if everyone who professes to be a Christian lived and acted and enjoyed as this man does, the religion of Christ would take the world by storm." Reflecting on Mr. Bunce's Christianity, the colonel said this, "I have told you Mr. Bunce converted me politically. He came nearer converting me religiously than I had ever been before. He did not make a very good Christian of me at first, as you well know, but he has wrought upon my mind a conviction of the truth of Christianity, and upon my feelings a reverence for its purifying and elevating power such as I had never had before. As a Christian by both word and deed, Horatio Bunce understood the depravity of the soul of man as taught in the Bible." But to return to the event, Crockett explains, "The next morning we went to the barbecue, and to my surprise found about 1,000 men there. I met a good many whom I had not known before, and they and my friend introduced me around until I got pretty well acquainted. At least they all knew me. In due time, notice was given that I would speak to them. They gathered up around a stand that had been erected, and I opened my speech by saying, 'Fellow citizens, I present myself before you today feeling like a new man. My eyes have lately been opened to truths which ignorance or prejudice or both had heretofore hidden from my view. I feel that I can render to you now a more valuable service than I have ever been able to render before. I am here today more for the purpose of acknowledging my error than to seek your votes. That I should make this acknowledgment is due to myself as well as to you. Whether you will vote for me is a matter for your consideration only. Colonel Crockett then goes on to explain about the fire in Georgetown and his vote for the appropriation bill. He then explained why, in retrospect, he now believed that this vote in the affirmative was wrong and a violation of the Constitution. He concludes his speech with these words, "And now, fellow citizens, it remains only for me to tell you that most of the speech you have listened to with so much interest was simply a repetition of the arguments by which your neighbor, Mr. Bunce, convinced me of my error." Crockett explained that all of the wisdom in his speech is due to this man, proclaiming he is entitled to the credit for it. And now I hope he is satisfied with his new convert and that he will get up here and tell you so. At this point, Colonel Crockett stepped down and Mr. Bunce humbly took the stand. "Fellow citizens," he started, "it affords me great pleasure to comply with the request of Colonel Crockett. I have always considered him a thoroughly honest man, and I am satisfied that he will faithfully perform all that he has promised you today." Mr. Bunce then stepped down. His words were short and to the point. Perhaps Crockett was hoping for more, but then and again, knowing the Christianity of this man, perhaps he later realized the application of Ecclesiastes 5:3, "A fool's voice is known by his many words." Now what happened next shocked the colonel to his core. Crockett explains that after Mr. Bunce had come down from the stand, there went up from that crowd such a shout for Davy Crockett as his name was never called forth before. "I am not a man given to much tears," said Crockett, "but I was taken with a choking and then felt some big drops rolling down my cheeks. And I tell you now that the remembrance of those few words spoken by such a man and the honest and hearty shout they produced is worth more to me than all the honors I have received and all the reputation I have ever made or ever shall make as a member of Congress." "Now, sir," concluded Crockett in response to the man who had asked why he had opposed the appropriations bill for this widow, "you know why I made that speech and opposed the $20,000 appropriation. There is one thing now to which I will call your attention. You remember that I proposed to give a week's pay? There are in the House many very wealthy men who think of nothing of spending a week's pay or a dozen of them for a dinner or a wine party when they have something to accomplish by it." Colonel Crockett explained some of those same men made beautiful speeches upon the floor of the House, the great debt of gratitude which the country owed the deceased, a debt which could not be paid by money, particularly so insignificant a sum as $20,000, especially when it is weighed against the honor of the nation. So what was Congress's response to Colonel Crockett's plea to give money out of their own pocket? In typical fashion, most congressmen, even after this plea, to donate 1 week's pay of their own to give to this poor widow. And though the appropriation had been voted down, no one, not a single congressman, accepted Davy Crockett's challenge to give to this woman out of their own pocket. He excoriated them by saying, "Money with them is nothing but trash when it is to come out of the pockets of other people. But it is the one great thing for which most of them are striving, and many of them sacrifice honor, integrity, and justice to obtain it." We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back in just a moment. Many Christians read their Bibles through the lens of pop prophecy books like The Late Great Planet Earth and the Left Behind series. They naively believe the prophetic schemes and theological presuppositions expressed in these and other fictional writings represent the doctrinal positions that Christians down through the centuries have embraced. However, that is far from the truth. Volume 1 of The Late Great Planet Church, The Rise of Dispensationalism, is the first documentary of its kind. It exposes this erroneous system of thought as breaking continuity with history and even the very Word of God. In this first volume, we examine